Fine.
Good.
Okay, I'm back.
Okay, so
I
we start-
answered the door, Rabbi, and I forgot my mask. I mean, it's insane. You got to have a mask, I think, sitting at your doorway in case your doorbell rings.
Yeah, I know.
But
I know.
my housekeeper had her mask on, and I had the vaccine, so I guess I'm safe.
Okay. Well, we say Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Can you see this? Can you see what I'm looking at? Can you see a text?
No,
Nothing. No,
Okay. I
nothing.
think I have to do a share. Where is the share screen? Okay, share screen, and then I have to exit there. I think you will be able to see something very soon. Can you see it now?
no.
No, really? Huh?
No.
Let me see here. Did I share the screen?
Nothing.
Well, I'm going to do it. I am going to do it. Okay. I think you're going to be able to see it in a moment. I just need to do this and move this. Oh, how do I move that? Okay. Okay. Okay, we're almost there. I'm going to share. Hold on. Okay, let's see. What about now?
It's on, but it's tiny.
Okay, I'm gonna blow it up.
Yeah,
Don't worry. Don't worry. So I'm going to introduce you to a concept, a term that is a great term you ought to know about, and it's Shalom Bayit. Can you say that? Shalom Bayit?
Shalom Bayit.
It's a great term. You'll hear rabbis using it a lot.
Peace to
Shalom.
the house. Peace to the
Yeah.
house.
A peaceful house. Yeah.
Right.
Bayit means house.
I know a couple of words.
So Shalom Bayit means, a peaceful house, but it goes it's something that you might do to enhance peace in your own family, but not just your family. We extend that concept to the community, to the broader community. I want Shalom Bayit with my neighbors, right? Sometimes I gotta figure out a way to make peace with my neighbors. We're all living sometimes literally you two live in apartments. You are under the same roof, and in your condominiums. So guess what? The Talmud has much to say about this.
Make it bigger.
About how specifically how to have Shalom Bayit. So let's do the first one. We're going to look at two Mishnayot today from Baba Batra, which is a tractate in the Talmud. So again, it sounds so mundane, but it is absolute. If you've ever had a problem with a neighbor, you know how these things can get out of hand, right? A simple little disagreement over a fence, over a tree, and it can be war. So the Talmud says it makes this effort, gives us some rules, and from these rules we'll try to extrapolate some concepts that might help us in our day and age. Now, life was a little different. Some of the technicalities were different in ancient Israel, but the concepts are very similar. So here we begin. No one may dig a cistern near his fellow cistern. A cistern was a big hole in the ground to collect water, okay? And
Can you make it bigger? Excuse me, can you make it bigger?
Yeah, I can certainly do that. Let me see if I can do this. How's that?
The writing is still small. It's just
Okay.
writing.
Okay, wait a minute.
Screwed it good.
Here we go. I'm going to greatly increase it. Okay. Here we're going to go
That's getting better.
No,
Okay. Very
That's better. That's good. It's
Oh.
okay for you. Oh, went back.
Oh, I'm gonna make it bigger here. Can you read that?
Yes. Good.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. So this is what it's a cistern is kind of a hole that you dig in and you often plaster it to be able to, and it collects water. And in places where it doesn't rain a lot, you want, and you're dependent on rainfall for your water supply, you want to save as much water as possible. So you might dig a big pool, and you would plaster it so it would hold the water, and the water wouldn't sink into the ground. Sometimes they would put a covering over it so it wouldn't evaporate, some kind of concrete hole, and with a place to be able to get your water. So you may not dig a cistern near your fellow's cistern, nor may he dig a trench, vault, water channel, or washing pool closer than 3 handbreadths away from his fellow's wall. He must plaster the wall with lime, piles of olive refuse, manure, and guess what? They had animals. So piles of olive refuse and manure, salt, lime, or stones may not be kept closer than 3 handbreadths from his fellow's wall, and he must plaster the wall with lime. Seeds or a plow may not be kept closer than 3 handbreadths from the wall. Now, we're going to look at what this is about. This is about fences, right? Not letting you have a property and it abuts somebody else's property. You want to make sure that whatever you're doing, it's not going to affect what's happening in the next guy's yard. You got to be considerate. So let's read. I'll read it for you. The comment in the bottom. The American poet Robert Frost wrote, "Good fences make good neighbors," right?
I remember that
How
one.
true is that? You should be friendly with your neighbors, but you got to make sure that the fences are good. The ancient Jews knew well that a good fence between neighbors lessens the chances for disputes. So fences were required. Moreover, to lessen even further the possibility of quarrels between neighbors, Jewish law went a step beyond Robert Frost's advice. By the rules of the Mishnah, Baba Batra, chapter 2, a good neighbor does not dig right alongside a fence or wall because this might undermine the fence, and any water in the digging might run into the neighbor's yard. So, that's why I'm not supposed to dig a trench too close to the wall, because it might flow into his lawn, right? Into his yard. If I dig a cistern, to collect water, I'm probably going to dig trenches, leading into my cistern. But I can't do this too close because some of the water might flow. If it backs up, it's going to flood his yard. So I have to keep at least 12 inches away from the fence. And in addition to that, what does it tell me? I have to, if I'm going to do a project like that, I got a fence. I share a fence with my neighbor. Not only can't I do the water channels and the cistern right next to the fence, if I am going to do something like that on my property, which is my right, I need to plaster the fence. So if there is a little flood from my project, it's not going to run into his or her yard. So, however, if you must dig a water channel, a trench, or a pit, you do so at least 3 handbreadths away from the fence. That's about 12 inches. And to make sure that even such holes or trenches are no threat to the fence or to the neighbor's land, you must plaster the wall. So this is keeping good fences, right?
Right.
And even though you own the property right up to the fence, it's saying, keep your project a little, a foot away from the fence. Just, that's the way shalom bayit, right? The water and undermining are not only hazards a good neighbor must guard against, things that rot. The Mishnah gives olive pits and manure as examples, and must be kept at least 12 inches away from the fence, which must be plastered. It is the same with chemicals, because it says salt, lime, for example, which might destroy the wall. So, they had animals back then. You might pile up the manure, right? But don't put it right next to the wall. The wall, especially if think the wall is made of wood, that can rot, right? And it could cause a stink. And if you got salt or lime, things that would eat away the fence, keep them away from the fence. So, okay, the rules in this Mishnah do not deal with major problems, with large sums of money or international trade. They deal with small, everyday problems. But these are just as important because many more people have fences and the possibility of disputes over fences than have problems with high finance. As much as anything else, the purpose of the Mishnah is to preserve shalom bayit, not just the individual house, but the house of Israel, the community. It's just showing a little consideration, right, for your neighbor. And again, most people would say, "Hey, it's my land, right up to the property line." The Mishnah says, "Listen, for shalom bayit, move it back a little bit. You don't want to rot that fence. You don't want water to flow over to your neighbor's yard." I've had this sort of thing. I've always had decent relations with my neighbors, but ever so often there's a tree. Like when I first moved to my house over on 15th Avenue, 15th and Dewey, we had a large tree, one of those kind of tropical trees that drop its roots from the branches, right? It was a magnificent tree, but I think it was some kind of locust tree, and it had a very shallow root system, and the root system ran under the fence into my neighbor Elise's property, and I think it was 2005, and I liked the tree, but we were very worried. She was worried that because of the shallow root system, if a hurricane hit, it would fall on her property, perhaps even her house. So even though it was on my property, I agreed and we shared the cost. I said, it's expensive. It's an expensive proposition to remove a tree. I'll pay part of you pay part of it, I'll pay part of it. I know it's my tree, but let's get rid of the tree so you can sleep more easily in case. And then you know what happened? Hurricane Wilma came through this neighborhood, and it probably would have been knocked down, and it probably would have hit her house. But I was willing for shalom bayit, to pay. It probably cost me $1,000, my share of taking down this large tree. But you need to make peace with your neighbors. Shalom bayit with your neighbors is very, very important. Okay, so, and again, people might say, these are just small things. Shouldn't the Talmud and the Torah deal with the bigger things? Guess what? Most of us don't deal with high finance international. It's the small things, right? How do you live a good, decent life, a Jewish life, a religious life? Uh, uh, it needs to be, you need to be attentive to the small things. Right. So here we have a second Mishnah. And I'm going to bring it down here so you can see it. Can you see it? Can you read it? Is that big enough for you?
Pretty good. How's it
I'll
for
make
you,
it-
buddy?
I'll make it a little bigger. I think I
Yeah.
can make it a little bigger.
Yeah.
A
that's
Mishnah
good.
is the story, Rabbi?
No,
Mishnah,
just the top part. The top part is what we want to read. I'll read the bottom part.
but the meaning of a Mishnah, Rabbi, is a
The
story?
Mishnah, the Mishnah is the oral law, the very kind of the beginning, the opening section of the Talmud. Okay, so Baba Batra deals with some of these small everyday challenges that we all face. Now, this should, for you condo dwellers, this should have some resonance. Okay. You live in multi-story buildings, right?
Right.
Well, they had, believe it or not, you had some multi-story buildings in ancient Israel. They were only 3 stories high, and certainly they didn't have elevators, but you had 3-story buildings in places like Jerusalem. And do you remember, I don't know, you might be, I'm old enough to remember, maybe you two are, when people, when there was mixed development, mixed zoning, where people would own a store and live above it. Do you remember? When I was a kid in Vancouver, and I know it was the same in New York and Philadelphia, you would have on the bottom floor stores, and above the
Right,
stores
right. I
apartments.
remember that, sure.
Yeah. And they don't do that anymore. There's
No?
much
You
more
don't think it's
much more
anymore?
restrict. There's much more restrict. You see it in New York and some
Yeah,
of the
New
old,
York, I
maybe
remember.
a little bit. But nowadays, there's very strict zoning. You got your commercial, you got a residential area over here, and you have your stores and a little strip mall or a major mall, right? That's
Right.
the way it is now. But the old days, people lived above their shops.
Right.
Some of the people lived in those apartments above the store. Where did you grow up, Betty?
In Ohio, Zanesville, Ohio, just a small
Oh, you
little town,
probably had it in Zanesville too. I've been to Zanesville.
probably.
And you were from New York, right, Marilyn?
A lot in Brooklyn, that's where I was born.
Well, you saw that a lot in Brooklyn. You saw-
All over.
yeah.
All over.
So let me just give you a little bit of the architecture. Now you got to see this. If you've ever been to Latin America, you will see this kind of condominium mixed use zoning, and they had it in ancient Israel. So I'm just going to read. I'm going to read the first part here. The third section of Baba Batra continues the rules aimed at preserving what? Shalom Bayit. This time it deals with the problem of noise, right? It's not always a problem of fences, it's a problem of noise. You got a noisy neighbor or, this, and also smells, someone's doing something that's stinking up the apartment, right? And possible interference with your neighbor's livelihood. Now, you don't have that problem because there's not a lot of businesses conducted in your apartments. Now, but certainly smells and certainly noise can get neighbors doing this, right? We've all had that. Now, in order to understand this Mishnah, you have to imagine the lifestyle of a town or city in ancient Judea, ancient Israel. The building is 2 or 3 stories high, roughly U-shaped, with a large courtyard in the open part of the U. Okay, you got the architecture? It's like a Spanish courtyard, right? It's open in the apartments are round. So on three sides, you have maybe a little gate where people come in and out, and you have 2 or 3 stories on 3 sides. Okay. Now, what happened? I can just explain what would happen. On the first floor, you had businesses. Okay, on the first floor, you had shops. Usually on the second floor, you had storerooms. Say you sold, food. Say you were a grocer, you might have your grain, you might have your rice, you might have flour on the second floor. You sold jewelry, it might be up there. Clothing, it might be up there. On the third floor, that's where people lived, okay? That's the way it usually went in ancient Israel. So you have 7 or 8 families living close together around a common courtyard. You saw that in the Spanish architecture. You ever been to the old, Spanish, some of this Spanish haciendas and that sort of thing. The courtyard itself raised the possibility of quarrels, right? Frequent quarrels. You got all sorts of people coming and going and doing stuff. Already, you got the possibility of quarrels, right? You can see how people bump into each other. It's noisy, it's smelly, it's who knows. Okay. Add their workshops. Some of the people they didn't have just shops, they were actually making stuff. You had retail outlets, right? And you had people, maybe a silversmith doing his thing, somebody, doing some textile stuff. And you can see how you could see all the trouble that this could cause, right? So let's get into the Mishnah. Okay, can you see at the top? Do you want to read there, Marilyn?
Where are we starting? Where?
See at the top, no one
may. Okay. No one may open a baker's shop or a dyer's shop under his fellow's storehouse, nor may he keep a cattle stall nearby. They, the sages, have allowed a baker's shop and a dyer's shop under a wine store, but not a cattle stall.
Okay, so we got some rules here. No one can open a baker's shop or a dyer's shop under his fellow's storehouse. Okay, and you can't have a cattle stall nearby. And because and they make an exception, except if you can't, because when you dye makes smell. When you're dyeing fabric and stuff, it can make a smell. And bakery, I happen to like the smell of
That's
baked bread, but presumably that smell and the warmth from dyeing fabric and from and you got ovens there. It could ruin stuff on the second floor, right? If your shop or the place where you're doing business is right below my storehouse, right? The warmth could presumably interfere with, it could ruin my stuff. But they said they make an exception here because for wine, they presumably, I never heard this, but the warmth actually could help the wine, right? But there's a lot of things that it could be bad. But in any case, you don't have the cows doing their business under anybody else's storehouse because it smells. You can't do that. It's pashnish, okay? Now, Betty, would you read a man may protest?
Yes, a man may protest against a shop within a courtyard and say to the shopkeeper, I cannot sleep because of the noise of those who go in and out. He that makes utensils right, should go to the market to sell, but no one may protest to another and say, I cannot sleep because of the noise of the hammer, or because of the millstones, or because of the noise of children.
Okay, so you have two functions here. You have, we're now dealing with noise abatement, and they're trying to figure out what's acceptable. Now let's look at the metal worker. Okay, the guy, maybe he's making silver jewelry, or he's doing tin stuff. Okay, and he's got a hammer, and you can't. Or the millstone. The millstone is, taking grain and making flour out of it. You can't. You have, if your neighbor is doing that on that first floor, you can't object to the noise that his tools make. Because why? That's the way he's making his living. You tell him he can't. The tinsmith can't be, making some noise. He's got to make some noise tapping his stuff. But you can object if he's selling stuff, if he's manufacturing and selling stuff, and his customers come in and they're yelling all day long about it, the price isn't right, that you can object to. If there's a ruckus made by the customers coming in and out, that you can object to. Why? Because there's a marketplace. Every city has a marketplace. So he can manufacture his stuff in his store or in his shop, and he can take it to the marketplace and sell it there. He doesn't have to sell it there, okay? So you can't interfere with a person's ability to make a living, when it comes to noise, but you certainly can object if their shop is open and at night and people are arguing about the price. That you can object to. And look at what they say about kids. Can you object about the noise of children? No. Kids are kids. Come on. They say kids are noisy. What are you going to do? You got to have a little tolerance for kids.
What about a hammer? A hammer. How can you have tolerance if it's banging, banging, banging a hammer?
Well, the man's got to make a living. This is what they're saying. He's making a living. You can't stop him. Well, let's read here. Okay. The next Mishnah deals with the question of noise. The sages differentiate between the noise created by a workman plying his trade and the noise of buying and selling what he made. The noise of tools, of a hammer, millstone, or millstones, are a necessary part of making a living. The noise has to be accepted, according to the rabbis, because it cannot be transferred. He's got no choice. But the noise of buying and selling can be transferred to the marketplace. So the clamor need not be accepted. An artisan can work at his dwelling place, but he has no right to sell his wares there if his neighbors object. Some people can have a store, if they keep the noise down, that's okay. And you can object to the noise of customers coming in. And now, you would think that you would have to be a little bit tolerant because, customers, do make a little bit of noise. You got to keep it down, a lot of this would depend on the goodwill of your neighbors. You would think that there should be something like a condo board, right? Something like that, right?
Right.
You got 7 or 8. You got 8 units there, 8 3-story units, and remember, a unit would be first, second, and third floor. And sometimes they weren't directly, sometimes they weren't piled on to each other. Sometimes you'd have the bottom floor here and a storage place over here and a dwelling space on top, a little distance away. You would think that if there was a vacancy and somebody said, I would like to buy or come in and live in the courtyard, you would think, I don't know whether they ever did this, but you would think that the existing tenants would say, so what is this guy, what kind of a business does he want to have? You assume everybody had a business near where they work. He's going to be making some, he's going to have a music, he's going to have a music school. He's going to be teaching electric guitar, drums. Now, are we willing to put up with this, right? You might say as a group, hey, Joe, we love your idea of a music school, but you know what? It's not right for this courtyard. We'll get somebody who has a sewing machine, who doesn't make a lot of noise, who's a tailor, right? To fill that space. So there would be some give and take, but what the Talmud is trying to do, okay, let's just do this about the kids. There's a note added to this Mishnah. No one may protest because of the noise of children. It seems unnecessary if people live around a common courtyard and there are children, there's bound to be noise. But for the legalists who might ask, where does it say that children are allowed to disturb my peace? The sages add, for the sake of shalom bayit. If you have young families in your courtyard, you know what? The kids are kids. You can't be. Now, personally, I would say, even personally, in the condominium, I would say, now I have a condo board now. I live in an HOA. I have an HOA. I live in a townhouse now. They're kids. If they're going to make a little noise, I can imagine if they start a rock band in the garage next door to me and they're playing at 3:00 in the night, I'm not going to put up with that. But, you need a certain amount of goodwill, right? For shalom bayit. You got to put up with a little bit of stuff, but there's a limit. And we see that the Talmud is trying to establish those limits in giving us, some rights. So what do you think? Betty, what do you think? Anything to add?
It just reminds me, speaking of noise, the other night, there was a neighbor, a guy next to me. I think he was playing music, and the music got louder for 11:30, 12 after that. And I'm trying to fall asleep, and I thought, well, isn't he going to shut it off to go to sleep, to go to work the next morning? And so I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to go knock on the door that late at night, but I could have called the security to tell him that he's playing it. I don't think he realized that because nobody seemed to complain otherwise. So
what I would have two words for him. Headphones. You even hear your music better.
That's a good idea.
Headphones. Hey, I'll buy you a pair of headphones. Plug them into your stereo.
Right.
Because you like it. Maybe that kind of music, don't assume we all like it. I mean, he should be a little more considerate at the time. And, you hear a little music, and if it's in the middle of the day, you're not there. Yeah. Who cares? At night when you're trying to sleep, I think that sort of discussion the rabbis would have taken up in Baba Batra, right? It's the type of thing that they would have just, it's shalom bayit. Hey, you don't sleep for 2 or 3 nights. You're a basket case, right? I know if I
Right.
don't sleep for 2 or 3 nights, I'm kept awake. I'm going to be cranky and not feel good, and yeah, it's making my life miserable. Marilyn,
What happened, Betty? You just allowed it?
And then it just, I didn't complain, and then I guess I just sort of fell asleep or whatever, so I thought, oh God, what's gonna happen the next night, but it was quiet, so I guess he was just,
it was one night
but
and you just let it go.
yeah.
Do you
Is it
ever
be-
talk to him? Do you ever see him?
Yeah, I mean, not lately, but I've seen him in the past. He seems nice and whatnot, but I just, I don't think he realizes it's that loud. The problem is when it's an apartment and, you can
Yeah.
hear everything next door. That's the thing,
Yeah,
but
that's right.
Well, maybe
That's
you
why-
can suggest what the rabbi said in a nice way the next time in a
yeah, I'm
conversation,
gonna tell him. That's what I'm
and
gonna do.
just mention it, so that he
Right.
can feel free to listen whenever he wants, and he may like it better. But
Right.
you have to do it in a sweet way.
Right,
Exactly. You don't want to take the guy's head off. You
Right.
want to say, gee, I heard, it was about 12, it was about midnight the other night. I like your taste in music. Oh, it's great music, but it's a little loud. Do you think you might be able to turn it down, use headphones, maybe? And listen, it doesn't bother me up to 10 o'clock. Do what you want within
Right.
reason. Then, but after that, and if he's a reasonable kind of guy, he'll probably apologize and do the right thing. If he's a jerk, you got to bump it up to the next level. Yeah.
Right.
But isn't it interesting how Judaism goes for the small potatoes? The big questions, the nature of God, the relationship of the Jewish people to the Almighty. How were the Ten Commandments go? And Judaism, basically, we see in the Talmud, it says, wait a minute, religion, it's got to be about the small things too, the little things. You're not always, just like we were talking about fences, we're not always involved in high finance. It's the small things that make for a peaceful world, or make for the opposite of a peaceful world. And I think Judge Judy is Jewish, isn't she?
I think so.
Judy
Yeah,
hates
she is.
small, and Judge Wapner, he was Jewish. And it's those small things. It's those $400, $500, $600 cases. That's important. Every case is important. What were you going to say, Marilyn?
Now, I have a question. I'm always getting confused. The
Okay.
Talmud comes from the Torah. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Well,
Talmud is the written part
yeah.
from the Torah, or the Torah doesn't necessarily discuss in the commandments what the
Yeah.
Talmud discuss. Is it the same or totally different? It's confusing.
It's a package. The oral Torah or the written Torah,
Yeah.
the Torah on the scroll, the written Torah, and the Talmud. And remember, the Talmud consists of 2 parts, Mishnah and Gemara.
Okay, Mishnah and
Some of the laws that the Mishnah and the Gemara, together being the Talmud, and we're just doing the Mishnah here, some of the laws that they discuss and expand on are taken directly from the written Torah. Some of them, like this one in particular, I'm not aware of. I'm not aware of any laws in the written Torah that deal with noise abatement in an apartment complex, right? I don't. But the rabbis of old would say these laws were given at the same time as the Torah was. It was the oral tradition. This too comes down from Sinai, and it has it has the same authority as the written Torah. Some of the Talmud is drawn directly from the Torah. Some of it was a little outside of the Torah, like this one, like this law. I'm not aware that the Torah has a law that you cannot have a cattle stall under someone's apartment, right? Makes good sense. If you're going
But
to
they
keep
would talk
animals.
about peace. The Torah perhaps
Yeah,
mentions
they would,
something about peace in general, the whole umbrella.
yeah, and so you can imagine if the people underneath you were keeping stinky animals, and that's, it would be a matter of shalom bayit if it was making your life miserable because of the stink, right? And you can't tell cows not to do their business. Animal stalls are smelly.
Shalom bayit.
But
those
the
words,
idea of
Rabbi,
peace,
are not in the Torah. Shalom
it's
bayit,
but the idea of peace is in the Torah, right?
peace, but not shalom bayit. That's the Talmud.
It would peace is implied, all over the place in the Torah, but specifically to prevent tenants from fighting over the smells coming from irresponsible
Talmud.
or inconsiderate behavior would not necessarily be specified in the Torah. But here's another thing. I remember studying, I don't know, maybe it was in rabbinical school, tanneries, when people tan animal hides and leather, you make leather and, other, and sheepskin, when you slaughter a sheep or a goat, you can use the skin, right? You can use the hide. You can make sheepskin jackets, and lambskin you can use for actually Torah, a scroll for the Torah. And certainly the hide of a cow or a bull you can use for leather, right? For shoes, for sandals, who knows? I understand, and from my readings in the Talmud, that it's a rather smelly operation to tan a hide. It's really smelly. And even the people engaged in it kind of, they can come home and smell, There's discussions about that. So there are zoning laws in the Talmud that say zoning laws, and I would call them zoning laws, that say that a tannery, which is a smelly business, has to be on the edge of town. It can't be in the middle of the residential or the business section. It's got to be, and it's got to be if the prevailing winds are east to west, it should be on the west side of town, because if it's on the east side, that smell is going to waft over into where people are living and doing their business. So it just makes good sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you would be perpetually, the town would be unbearable. I mean, where I'm from in British Columbia, pulp and paper mills are a big deal. Paper manufacture, because we have a lot of forests there. Forestry was king. And when I was growing up, now British Columbia has all sorts of industries, but pulp and paper, and they use sulfur to make paper. You may not know this, but I know it from my youth, driving through small towns along the Fraser River. Sulfur, you say, I got to roll up the windows. Oh, there must be a pulp and paper mill around here. Ugh, right? Notice I rolled up the windows. I didn't press a button. In those days, we had to roll up our windows, right? Nowadays, you press a button. we did not have a pulp and paper mill in Vancouver because it's a big city, right? We wouldn't have put up with it. We would have closed it down. Now, an exception to this, I went 2 blocks away from, about 4 or 5 blocks away from where I grew up, and 2 blocks away from my elementary school. Molson's Beer Company had a brewery, a big brewery on, well, it was called on Burrard Street. And so many days when I was walking to school, I could smell the hops. Nobody seemed to have, I could smell them. I remember, so what does that smell? It's beer, right? It's the hops apparently nobody objected to it. The sulfur smell, people objected to. The smell of beer, people said, hey, that's okay. So, but it would have become an issue if people objected to it. They would have had to put it out someplace in one of the, in a more of a rural area. So, yes. So what's,
Can I mention something else? I thought of, it has to do with noise. I just remember that many years ago, there was a young couple that lived next door to me, a young girl, she went to college, and the boyfriend was working. And so I remember one night, a number of nights, she would play, she had like a late schedule, I guess she went to bed late, and I went to bed earlier, and she played the music and the TV very loud, and it was right next to my bedroom. And I thought, well, how am I going to get this? It got to be, past 12, 1 o'clock. And I thought, oh,
yeah,
that's very inconsiderate. Yeah. So I just decided to, a couple of times I did nothing. And then a number of times I called the security and I told them that such and such person next door to me is playing the music. Please tell them to turn it down. And I guess I did, but I had to do that quite a number of times. So one night I just decided to go next door, and I knocked on the door, and I said, and I introduced myself, and I said, you're playing that music very loudly, and she sort of said like, oh, she didn't realize that or whatever, and she said, well, I have she says, I have my schedule, my life, and so forth. And I said, well, that's true, but I said, she says, what do you want me to do? I said, just try to be a little considerate, of each other,
yeah.
that's so it's like she didn't really want to try to do anything about it. But when you live in a condo,
you did your best.
There's
Did
certain
she
rules.
change? Was it better after that?
It got a little bit better, but then later she moved away, so I was
So
happy.
you were lucky.
Yeah,
That's a good one.
good neighbors are a blessing. I've been blessed with having good
Right.
neighbors.
Absolutely.
Over in the corner of Maryland, and I knew all of our neighbors, most of them in, around 15th and Dewey. We got to be friends, and they kind of threw us a bit of a socially distant party when we left 2 months ago. They were sad to see us go. And I loved them all. They were all very nice people. We had young couples, older people, retired people, all sorts of, and we all kind of watched out for each other. So I think the neighborhood is not as friendly. I've heard there are other people have sold properties, and there's some Airbnbs going in, and you got parties going on, and people are littering in the neighborhood.
Problems.
So I think I moved out at the right time, and now I'm in a townhouse community, and everybody is very friendly. I don't want to be too friendly. You know what I mean? Because that could be, that could be a little,
too, yes.
But people are very nice. So far, everybody's been really nice, and they, I'll watch out for them. I'm not gonna. You don't want to intrude on other people's lives. You want to be friendly with not everybody has to be your best friend. I don't need to be involved in everybody's life, but you should be considerate and friendly of everyone. And I think that's all. That's what Shalom Bayit is, right? Shalom Bayit. Okay, gang. That's all I got to say about that. It's good stuff.
Let me just mention one other thing I just thought of. In an apartment building, if people have dogs, I don't know if you've been blessed with no dogs near you, Betty. I have not had the problem, but in other floors, there have been issues that the board had to take up with people who have their dogs. They leave for the day and then the dogs
Dogs
serenade
bark all day.
the whole
Yeah.
floor.
Yeah, we had problems, yeah.
That's certainly a Shalom Bite subject that
It
has to
is.
be
It
taken care of.
is. And it can make people's lives miserable. It can cause people to get into really
That's right.
serious disputes.
That's a good one.
But you know, to me, if you got an animal, you know, if you can't keep that animal quiet, you know, an occasional bark, okay, that's fine. But you know, if that dog yaps all night long or during the day, even when you're gone, you know, they're different breeds of dogs. You know, some are very
right.
nervous, and
Yeah.
maybe that's not the kind of dog you should have in an apartment building.
Right.
Research a little bit.
That's good.
Some dogs are perfectly fine to be caged, and they'll just sit there quietly till their owners get home. Yeah, I don't know. I've never lived. I mean, you know, when I was very little, I lived in an apartment, but I haven't. I've mostly lived in houses and in townhouses in my life, and I kind of like that better. I like a little separation. Good fences make good neighbors. Okay, guys, love you.
Stay well, Rabbi.
Like
Stay
you
well,
said.
Betty. Good to
Catch
see
you
you.
Okay,
later.
bye, Marilla.
Mwah, mwah,
Bye.
mwah. Stay
Bye-bye.
well. Thank you.